10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How's that for production values, folks? Was that suspenseful for you? I know it wasn't for me, but hopefully this object lesson of the coconut tree deception will be made more real by that very ridiculous opening. Anyway, let me get right into it by saying there were two men on a lifeboat, and their ship had recently shipwrecked in the South Pacific. All on board were lost except for these two men, Johnny and Harry, and they're on this lifeboat in the high seas. And finally, they detect a very small island in the background. And they maneuver the raft to point toward the island, and they start paddling like mad. It's a very small island, and maybe one or two palm trees are there, and one or two mango trees, whatever. I don't have my botany correct. I'm not sure if mangoes grow with coconuts or whatever, but they do get in this narrative to the island, and they realize when they're on this small island, nothing around, just from some trees, some coconut trees, some mango trees, and on the ground, some old mangoes and coconuts rotting away. There's not even a creature, much less a human being there. So they're exhausted. They know they're the only ones there, and they go to the base of a tree, and Harry leans against one side, and Johnny props himself up against the other side, and they go to sleep. And very intoxicating, tranquilizing sleep, because they've been on a raft for a day and a half. And they go into this slumber, and all of a sudden, Harry gets woken up with this bash on his head. And he feels his head, and his head is bloody. And he looks on the ground, and he sees this bloody coconut on the ground. And he turns to Johnny and says, "Why did you do this to me?" And he nudges Johnny, and Johnny doesn't move. And he yells even louder, "Why, Johnny, are you pretending to be asleep when you just bashed me over the head with this coconut? Look, let me show it to you." And it's got blood stains on the outer brown shell. And Johnny declares, I was asleep. I didn't do anything. And they look around, and there's no creatures. And then Johnny says, "Well, maybe the wind blew a coconut down from above." And they both stare up, and they don't see any exposed coconuts. Plus, it's a very tranquil, steady day. There's not even a whisper of a breeze. So again, Harry is feeling his head and looking at the wound and trying to brush off the clotted blood. And the men grow increasingly angry with each other, and both stand up and become wildly antagonistic. And Harry throws the first punch at Johnny, and Johnny falls and gets up and throws another punch at Harry. And the fight continues until both men are exhausted and falling on the ground with each other's wounds. And now they go into this sleep of exhaustion. It's not the tranquil, orderly sleep that they were involved in to begin with. They're just exhausted about being in the seas for a day and a half and now fighting each other. And they're completely taxed to the limit. And they just lie down, staring up. And as they stare up at the tree, Harry declares to Johnny, "I'm sorry for accusing you." And Johnny lifts his head up, also bloodied now through the fight. And he says, "What do you see up there?" And Harry says, "Oh, please forgive me for starting that fight, because way high in the tree, way high in the treetop, I can see a small baby gorilla that's hoarding some coconuts at the very top, and trying to stay concealed. And apparently he resents our presence here. And when we fell asleep the first time, he threw down a coconut, and he's the one who bashed me on the head. Now, I say all of that to say this. Both men were duped and deceived by this baby gorilla into fighting each other. This tale, by the way, was told to me originally by my dad, who I thank for the inspiration here. Bless his soul, he's passed on, but he taught me this at a young age about deception. And who do you think the baby gorilla stands for in this parable? Who would that be? Some of you might have the answer right away, and some of you might not. But the point is, it's an invisible, to the two men, Harry and Johnny, an invisible force that we born-again believers in Jesus know as Satan. Now, if you're not a born-again believer in Jesus, you probably think, this is crazy. There's nothing invisible. Everything is visible. It's not so, because what's invisible is often much more pronounced and effective and impactful than that which is visible. Scripture says in Ephesians 2, verse 2, speaking of the life that they had, the born-again believers had before they were saved, they said, wherein in time past ye also walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit, the invisible spirit, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. And later on, and Paul says in Ephesians 6:12, he says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high heavenly places. In other words, there's a pocket of hierarchy of invisible demonic beings led by the chief of all demonic beings, Satan, who controls the world and controls the upper atmosphere of spirit. This is Satan. Also in 2 Corinthians 10, 3 and 4, Paul says, though we walk in the flesh, we war not after the flesh. In other words, though we take care of business in bodies of flesh, that's not where our warfare is. For we war against spirits. We war against the unseen forces led by Satan. Again, that baby gorilla hidden up in the coconut palm. And our warfare must be conducted through prayer alone, because we fight the invisible force up there. Now, if this seems very, very odd to you, these concepts, know this: to get a handle on the invisible force of Satan, the invisible evil source, you need clarity, and you need to be able to see the opposite. You need to be able to see the opposite of the evil, which is pure good, which is Jesus Christ, who came to sacrifice himself for mankind so that we wake up and start warring against the true evil. So we'd be able to see the baby gorilla in the treetop of the coconut palm. It's simple to see Jesus. All you have to do is admit that he's there. Acknowledge that he's there. For instance, if you go into a room and you take a chair at a table for dinner, you're assuming, you're putting your trust in the fact that the chair is there and it's going to hold you. Just assume and acknowledge that Jesus might be there, even if you don't think he's definitely there.